I'm Scott Bernhard Kyle.
And I'm Jenna McLean.
And you're watching U.S. News.
Now here's Bella with the Industrial Revolution.
Thanks, Jenna. I am Bella Peterson, and I am with the U.S. News. The event I'm bringing to you is the Industrial Revolution. This happened in the U.S., and the time period was 1760 to sometime around the 1820s and 1840s. The issue was people all over the U.S. had to make things by hand to survive. So people in the U.S. decided to make machines. The Industrial Revolution was of great importance to the economic development to the U.S. During this time, Thomas Edison made a vacuum inside of the light bulb and sending a lower volt of electricity into it. Before he invented the vacuum, 23 other light bulbs were invented before this. Some of the effects were transportation was expanded, electricity was effectively. 3 improvements were made to the industrial process. These improvements were made by American inventors like Thomas Edison. The causes were people made hundreds, 10,000 riots and strikes because of this event. Back to you, Jenna and Scott.
Now here's Sarah Callahan with 9/11.
I'm Sarah Callahan, and you're watching the U.S. News. I will be telling you about a horrible story on the September 11th attacks 2001. It all happened on the date of September 11, 2001. How it all happened was American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, out of Boston for Los Angeles, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. In New York at 8:48, 18 minutes later, Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing of 776, heading from Boston to Los Angeles and crashed into the South Tower. American Airlines Flight 75, Boeing 757, from Washington's Dulles International Airport bound for Los Angeles, crashed into the western wall of the Pentagon at 9:40 a.m. United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757, flying from New York to San Francisco, crashed near Pittsburgh. As a prime suspect, although bin Laden himself denied this, in a statement issued to the Arabic satellite channel Al Jazeera, a Pakistan paper reported to said, "I already am not involved with the 9/11 attacks. My person of interest is George W. Bush." At 7 a.m., President George W. Bush, who had spent all day being shuttled around the country because of the security concerns, he delivered a televised address from the Oval Office declaring terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings.
Thank you, Sarah. Now here's Scott Bernhard with the World War.
Thank you, Jenna. In 1939, Hitler was planning on taking over the world. He started World War II. His army, also known as Germany, bombed Poland. He got all the countries involved. Then, in 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, USA. That is how we as America got involved. We then teamed up with England. Then we bombed Germany. Mark County is the pilot that bombed Germany. There was another bombing that ended the war. Mark also was the pilot who bombed Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Hiroshima was bombed by the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force. The war was over and Mark was known as a really big hero because of the 2 bombings he did. I'm Scott Bernhard reporting for U.S. News.
Thanks, Scott. Now here's Jenna McLean on the Revolutionary War.
I'm Jenna McLean, and I'm talking about the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War was a war between 13 original colonies and Great Britain. The war lasted from 1775 to 1782. There were 9 battles. The 13 colonies won after 8 long years. The Continental Congress formally declared independence in 1776. The causes of this war were the growing demand for freedom from Great Britain. Another cause was the taxes were rising. None of the colonies were free. Another commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He crossed the Delaware River twice. He became president after the war.
Thank you, Jenna, for that lovely report.
Now here's Max Curley with the Indian Removal Act.
Thank you. I'm Max Curley, and I'm here reporting on the Indian Removal Act. This act was done by President Andrew Jackson. Before he was elected, people wanted the Indian Territory. So as soon as Andrew was elected in 1829, he got right on the act. Later in the mid-1830s, Andrew Jackson made all tribe leaders move. The tribe leaders lost and were forced to sign treaties stating they had to move. All the tribes started to move in the winter of 1838 and 1839. About 4,000 Indians had died from cold, hunger, and thirst. One person would like to focus on is Andrew Jackson. In my opinion, Andrew Jackson is one of the greatest presidents. He had shut down stores and banks and was the cause for about 4,000 Indian deaths. He was born on March 15th, 1767, and died on June 8th, 1845. And he is the 7th president. That's all. I am Max Curley. Back to you.
Thanks, Max.
Now here's Antwone Garrick with the Civil Rights Movement.
My name is Antwone Garrick, and I'm going to tell you about the civil rights movement. The African Americans and Southern states still inhabit a starkly unequal world of disfranchisement, suggested in various forms of observation, including race-inspired violence. Jim Crow, President, laws at the local and state levels varied them from classrooms to bathrooms, from theaters and train cars, also from juries and legal structures. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down to separate but equal the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Many leaders from within the African American community and beyond rose to commence during the Civil Rights era, including Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, and Andrew Goodman, and many others. They risked and sometimes lost their lives in the name of freedom and equality. Thank you for listening.
Now here's Julia Dwyer with the Cold War.
Hi, my name is Julia Dwyer with the news on the Cold War. This started in 1945 and ended in 1991. There was no large-scale fighting directly between the two sides, Russia and the United States. The Cuban Missile Crisis sparked a major confrontation between the U.S. and the Soviet Union when the U.S. discovered the existence of the Soviet missile installation in Cuba. This also happened after World War II. The Cold War was a state of political and military tension after World War II. The first phase of the Cold War began in the first 2 years after the end of the Second War in 1945. Raul Castro played an important role in the Cold War. He was a military leader. He was a Cuban president and succeeded Fidel Castro in 2008. Under Fidel, Raul was the head of Cuba's armed forces and served as defense minister. The Soviet Union breaks up into an independent republic and the Cold War ends.
Thanks, Julia.
Now here's Carlena Jasionis with the Great Depression.
My name is Carlena Jasionis, and I'm telling you about the Great Depression. The Great Depression was all over the world. It is an economic depression in the 1930s. The timing of the Great Depression varied across nations. However, in most countries, it started in 1929 to the late 1930s. It was the longest, deepest, and most widespread depression in the 20th century. The Great Depression had devastating effects in countries which are poor. Personal income, tax-free spending, profits and prices dropped while the international trade plunged by more than 50%. Unemployment in the U.S. rose to 25%, and some countries rose to as high as 33%. Back to you, Jenna.
Carlena.
Now here's Devon Tamberella with the Civil War.
Hello, it's Devon Tamberella here reporting for U.S. News about the Civil War. Here is the location of the Civil War was in the U.S. The date was April 12, 1861 to and the slavery issue. Before and during the Civil War, the North and South differed greatly on common issues. The war was about slavery, but primarily about its economic consequences. The Northern elite wanted economic expansion that would change the Southern way of life. The effects of the Civil War was one of the most tragic wars in American history. More Americans died than in all other wars combined. Abraham Lincoln was the president of the United States during the Civil War. Lincoln led the Union to victory in the Civil War and also ended slavery in America. Back to you, Jenna and Paul.
Now you're watching U.S. News.